Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to Noonday Meditation and Contemplative Prayer Power Hour, where we have been gathering in this virtual sanctuary for over a year now to love and support each other through this last year of the pandemic and the crisis and everything that came along with that. My name is Martin Cowart, and I'm so excited to have you with us today. As this month we are celebrating this month gay, bi, trans, and questioning men who are extraordinary gay, bi, trans, and questioning men who do ordinary things that inspire us. And I'm so excited today to have a friend of mine that I met last summer on the beach. Actually, he had got his kite, a beautiful kite, on the beach, tangled up in a palm tree. And I was watching him try everything he could by himself to untangle this kite from the palm tree. So I decided to go over and help him. And I'm glad I did, because we became friends instantly. And we ended up going on me and him and his girlfriend at the time went on some fun adventures together on the beach. And it was a lot of fun. And we had a good time getting to know each other, and we've stayed in touch. And he's just a marvelous guy with a big heart, and he's full of love and generosity. And he's got something that I don't know much about. And that's why I'm so excited about him. And it's called Sankofa. And I don't know much about Sankofa, but he does. And he knows a lot about it. And he's going to not only tell about what it is, but why it's important to us, for all of us, black or white, why it's so important for the world to understand what this important information is all about, this understanding of our history is all about. So I'm going to be quiet, which I have a hard time doing because I'm a speaker and I love to speak. And I'm going to turn it over to Nehemiah and let him tell you all about that and share maybe some stories about how he got. I'd love to know how you got interested in this. That's always people. How did you get here, Nehemiah? Why don't you start with just telling us how you got interested in Sankofa? Am I
Thank you so
saying it
much.
right?
Sankofa, you got it right.
Okay.
Hello, Audrey. Thank you for dropping in the comments. So we welcome all the comments and everybody who wants to be here in the community today. So like Martin said, my name is Nehemiah Legiste. My pronouns are he, she, they. I say, as long as I say with love, you can call me anything you want. And so thank you, Martin, for allowing me to come back here. And it is funny how we met. I think back all the time that like you said, I literally caught my kite in a tree on the beaches of Puerto Rico, and it took me, I think, a solid hour to get it out of the palm trees. But Martin was there to catch the kite when I finally got it down, and so the universe kind of connected us in a very interesting way. And I'm very glad that it did. In terms of Sankofa, this has been something that's very important for me as I've been establishing my identity and who I am as a person. For some context, I am Haitian, and so I studied. One thing I've learned is that you can change the future by changing the past. And what I've learned is that ultimately, a lot of people where they think they're going is based off where they think they came from. So their origin story, right? So what made you, the factors that brought you here, what was life before, what was your family life before, and one thing that's been helpful for me to understand, particularly being a dark skinned Haitian, is understanding the history of my people. And not just my people, but also understanding the history of other peoples as well, to really see the commonalities and the common bonds that come across to us across all civilizations, cultures, languages, no matter what the time frame is. And so the idea of Sankofa is the idea of going back to the past, studying your history, knowing your lineage, understanding not just about your history, but other history as well, to take what is useful from that past to continue to create your next future. And so for me, so I'll give you a very good example. And this is a conversation that me and Martin had briefly, I would say, over the past year or so. So one thing I love to study revolutions, right? The acts of resistance. And one thing you see all the time. There was an author. He notes that ultimately one of the first slave revolutions was Moses in Egypt. Right, and even though it's a very popular story, it's not really framed as an uprising. It's not really framed as a revolution, but this changed the whole economic system of Egypt, right? When Moses was able to help liberate the folks and bring them to the promised land and all those sorts of things. And those kind of examples where you see human beings just like me and you, right? Because the one thing you learn throughout history is that there are no special human beings. Nobody is any greater or less than. than anybody else. All it is somebody who has an idea, somebody who has some sort of initiative, somebody who has some sort of vision, somebody who has any level of ambition for what they want to see in the world, thinking about their spiritual energies, understanding how to manifest that in the physical world, and then bringing about that change that they see in their heart and their mind and in their souls. And so with Sankofa, that's what it inspires me to do, is to live in the not in the footsteps per se, but in the lineage of people in my past and my ancestors who have always persisted, always resisted, but also found ways to find joy in the world and within themselves as well. And so that's one thing, particularly the past year or so, which while we're very much so in a very unique situation, in this context, something like this has never happened to us, right? And the way in which the world is the way the world is now. However, one of my favorite sayings, my friends know this, is that some civilizations have seen the apocalypse before, right? When you study history, when you study how languages die, when you study different warfare, there's been civilizations who about 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever the timeline you want to say, they actually saw what happened when, okay, everything's going great, we're doing well, and then pure chaos in terms of, detrimental effect. And now your language is gone, now your culture is destroyed, and now there are almost no remnants of your existence on this earth. And so for me, that's the idea of Sankofa, right? Going back in the history, understanding that there's been chaotic matters throughout human history. This is once again, this context is new for us, right? In the way in which we have technology now, right? 500 years ago, I couldn't call Martin, hey Martin, there's an earthquake going on, right? But there was earthquakes going on, right? I couldn't send a text message 1,000 years ago saying, hey, my village is being destroyed right now by these marauders, but the human condition, that's what the history teaches, right? The human conditions, that's nothing new. And so for me, I'm very fortunate where I have friends who are elders who have seen more years than I have, and it's helpful to have those kind of conversations to go back and ask for advice, just talk and reflect upon those kind of things. And it's also helpful to think about your elders, not as just the people who are alive right now in the physical realm, but also in the spiritual realm as well, right? Those wealth of experiences, from my experience, they're there for us. I think we have to be willing to reach out to them and touch those wealth experiences in spiritual realm because there's so much lesson to be learned in that kind of way. And so one of the examples I think about all the time is, like I said, the Haitian Revolution, because that is one of the things that really does drive me as a Haitian and as a person to think about how I want to orient myself around the world. So for some context for people who don't know, the Haitian Revolution, they'll put the dates at 1791 to 1804. So the dates don't necessarily matter, but the time span does, right? So this is ultimately close to a teenager of a revolution, right? So about 15 years, that's how long it took. And so for me as a person, as I'm also an activist too, I do a lot of work in the educational realm. When I think about change, what is required, I've had an example in my mind. Oh, this change doesn't happen in 6 months. It can. It might not happen in a year, but the accumulation of all those people who had a belief, right? Some people did not see the revolution come to its culmination, but those people, they had a belief system, and they kept working, and they kept working, and they kept working. And once again too, I studied this stuff, so I can tell you it was not looking good all the time. At one point in time, it was not looking good for the folks who were uprising. However, that one thing that people said couldn't happen, it happened. And the only way it happened was those people in being synchronized with the physical realm and the spiritual realm, understanding that what was going on in terms of the social, economic, and political landscape did not sit well with their spirit, right? It did not help them actualize. They knew that something needed to be different. And even though once again, right, this is a new place. Haiti didn't exist 400 years ago, right? It was a colony of Saint Domingue, right? So even the name of itself, Haiti, right? I'm a Haitian. There were no Haitians 400 years ago. And so that is to say that when you have a vision, when you have something in mind, and your spirit calls you, it's important to not think about what hasn't happened yet, right? What you haven't seen yet, what you haven't experienced yet, because there is so much more waiting for you once you can embrace the idea that you can create things that you've never seen before, experiences that you've never even thought that you would be able to actualize or manifest in your world. And for me, a lot of that starts from embracing the idea that we're all connected, whether we want to or not just human beings, right? Because as I'm getting more into my elderhood, I'm embracing we all have beings. The trees, those are spirits, right? The animals around you, those are spirits. The birds around you, that's all spiritual energy. And so the more we can really be in tune with the spiritual energy around us, understanding I'll use the word magic, and I'm beginning to
I
for
love
some context.
magic. I love magic, and I love what you're hitting on because Eckhart Tolle, who is someone that I follow a lot, he has a frame. He says, human beings, millions of humans, one being, which is just life. We're all connected to, we're just all one being, lots of humans, lots of trees, lots of everything else, but it's just one life energy, and we're all connected through that, even if we're not here any longer.
Because that spiritual energy, it transcends the physical realm. And so an example, right? So like I said, all those revolutionaries in Haiti, the big example I'll say is that near the end of the war, so this is by 1804, Dassaline, he's one of the generals. He makes a call to say, hey y'all, we're almost done with this war. There's only one way out of here. And so at the time, you understand, Haiti. These are enslaved Africans who were transported to this island of Saint Domingue, along with some of the black folks who were born there as well, with the European enslaved masters and plantation owners, right? So it's almost strictly black and white, but there's also a faction of and we call them gender couleurs. We actually, so people of color, right? So that the term people of color is actually not a new term. It's been used before, and it was used to signify the people who were in between the slave owning class, which is mostly Europeans and white folks, and the enslaved class, which are mostly African born peoples. And Dassaline made an order once that he saw that the war was almost finished. Hey, there's two things need to happen to be a citizen. You have to be considered black in Haiti. Like internally, if you want to be a citizen in Haiti, you have to be black. And two, we have to destroy and kill all the white people on this island. That was his call, because what he saw was, based on his experience throughout this about 13-year war. He saw that they were never going to stop. In his mind, he said, yeah, if I want the freedom for this island, for these people coming through, this is the only way I see this happening. And one of the things he did was, and this is how race and stuff gets complicated. One of the fun, interesting more stories is that there was actually a small Polish army in Haiti who was hired by the Britons, not Britons, by the French. The Polish didn't. They actually abandoned the French troops because they were inside of Haiti, so, on the side of the enslaved Africans. So when Dassaline did his order to kill all the white folks on the island, who did he not kill? The Polish people, right? And so even though they were still white, their allegiance, right, was to the cause. And so, and I mentioned Dassaline very much often because I'm always wondering what is required, right? How do you synchronize what you feel in your spirit with the physical realm, and then how are you able to come to terms with the decision making, right? Those hard decisions that you think are appropriate for your life, for the life of your family, for the life of the people you see in the future. Because Dassaline, he was not just thinking about right now; he was thinking, I know how war goes. I know how vengeance goes, right? And he's thinking, okay, this might be a hard call, but this is a call I have to make. And he's one of the few people who ever made that call. And for him, when you read the text, when you read the his speech on Haiti's independence, you can feel just the veneration of all the ancestors, and him feeling a need to think about, if my ancestors were here, all the enslaved folks who have been destroyed the past 10, 20, 100 years, what would they do? He literally says, if we don't do this, their bones will reject us. As in, when we come to the spiritual world and they saw we had this power, why this is what you did? You had this opportunity. And so once again, right, it's the idea that it's important to think about the physical realm and the way we're here now, right? So as Martin says, we can't be afraid of money. We can't be afraid of what's going on in our world. We can't be afraid of technology. We really do have to embrace everything that's come with us because everything's a tool. Nothing's bad or good. It all has dark and light energy, and it's our job to figure out the best ways to maneuver that and navigate around that. And it is important to understand that this is not our first time here, right? Our spirits, they've been traveling across distance and time, and they've seen things. And I think it's upon us to really embrace what our spiritual ancestors have done before, the perspectives, because they're human beings, right? So nothing they've done is outside the boundaries of what we can do. And that's the most important thing with Sankofa. No matter the greatest or the worst thing anybody's done in your imagination is not outside the boundaries of what you, including me, right, or what you can do. And so you have the highest limits and the dark limits within us. And it's through studying that history that you really learn the ways in which you can best configure and maneuver those energies to bring out the purpose that you want to live out in your life.
I love that. And I want to tune into my home state of Georgia and talk about a woman, an African American woman, who is, in my judgment, leading a revolution in that state. I promise you, she is leading a revolution in that state. Her name is, you know her as Stacey Abrams, and she has organized and she has put out the fight and she has tapped into that spiritual part of herself and her ancestry and said enough is enough, and she has turned that state around. I would say she is a, I don't know, people don't realize it, but often people have a misunderstanding of why Jesus was crucified. He wasn't crucified because of the Jews. That really was kind of that's a bunch of nonsense, really, to create anti-Semitism. Why he was crucified and so brutally was that he was a leader, a leader, a revolutionary leader of nonviolent resistance against the empire, and that scared the Roman Empire, and that's why he was executed. So he's an example of nonviolent resistance against domination. And I just think that in hearing your story, I can't help but think about the best example of how we bring the past into the future and make it to now to recreate a new future. And Stacey Abrams is organizing all of these people into the truth in the state of Georgia. And she's taking down an old, racist, white power structure piece by piece by telling the truth. And it's just wonderful, wonderful to see what you're talking about being manifested in our world right now by African American people, especially women. And they're leading. And I think women right now, I think as we move into the divine feminine of this era, which is more of a more caring. And I mean, the divine feminine is that part of us that cares about others more than ourselves. And so it's never going to work with a place of violence. It's always going to work with a place of generosity and love and healing. And she's healing the state of Georgia, from my perspective. She's healing that state. And I just would love to hear your perspective of that as in relation to how the past and the ancestors of the past could be influencing the future of this country, particularly around race.
Yeah, and that's and I think and I think that's might be one of the places, maybe the only place we disagree. I think I absolutely believe that there is a place for violence in revolutions, in revolutionary acts. I think it needs, like anything else, it needs to be very strategic and specific. But and that's the same, particularly as a Haitian, also too. I studied the Grenadian Revolution, and that was my question that I say all the time is that there was no other way outside of to the death, right? And unfortunately, in terms of the physical realm, right, in terms of Haitian Revolution, because when you study this, they actually the enslaved people actually tried negotiating, and this sounds ridiculous, but they actually tried negotiating with their slave owners, saying, hey, okay, can we not do these kind of punishments? Can we have one day off? And what you saw was the relentless push, right, to dominate.
No,
And those
I know I'm not condoning one way or the other. I'm just making notice of the fact that, from my perspective, we never really achieved true happiness and joy by violence. We might achieve a certain victory in a moment in time that may be necessary in that moment in time. I mean, we all enter. I mean, what we did. I mean, for example, the violence we caused on Germany during World War II. to stop the execution of Jewish people by the Hitler. So I'm not like I'm against violence. I understand, like I'm not agreeing with you, but I think we get a lot far a more reaching and a more permanent change in creating a future when we can find nonviolent ways to impact change and make a difference in the world, which is what I'm talking about with Stacey Abrams.
Oh,
So I'm
absolutely.
not saying that yes, sure, there are definitely times when throughout history and probably times again when there is some form of violence that needs to be done in order to stop someone who's narcissistic and dangerous. I mean, and these white people were narcissistic and dangerous. They didn't give a crap about black people. They just wanted their own way, and they would kill. So it was just a matter of, in my self-defense in a lot of ways, what it was. So I'm not against what they did. I'm just saying that I think what I'm trying to talk about today is an example here of someone who has stepped into that, who looked in the past and said, "Wait, there's a better way here to really make a permanent change in the way America is going to go forward around race." Because then we all win. Everybody wins. Black people, white people, everybody wins.
And that is the thing. That is where we would agree, where that this is all about living our best, like living, being as actualized as we all can be, and that is the tragic. That is one of the most tragic things, even about this conversation, is that race doesn't really exist, right? So for as much as our hues are different, our spirits, our personhood, right? That doesn't make us any, once again, either more valuable or less valuable. And unfortunately, right, and that's what I mean, in the spiritual realm, right, race and racism, those things don't exist, because those are very much so physical manifestations. And ultimately, though, that's the thing where, synchronizing, once again, understanding that we all have our personhood, we all have our being, right? And that based on, no matter what your body parts are, your hue, your skin, that doesn't change those things. But then you also have to come back to the physical world and really to figure out, how do you synchronize those things, right? How do you understand, what are the systems, once again, system of oppression, the joy in the world, with the context of who you are as a person, and then, then operating in that way. And so for me, I actually have a lot of black women in my life, personally, and as heroes as well. One of them I would like to mention is Claudia Jones and Ida B. Wells. And so Claudia Jones, she was, I say all the time, she was a gangster of gangsters. So she was born in she was born in Trinidad, came over to the USA, caused all sorts of trouble. Right? She was a writer, she was an activist. She was so good that the USA deported her to England. Do you know what she did in England? She started the West Indian Gazette, and started a cultural celebration that still lasts to this day, over 40 years ago, right? And so for her, she was, so speaking of nonviolence, I will say she was one of those people who showed me that there are ways to create culture, there are ways to resist, there are ways to bring people together, in the idea of joy, and the idea of community, right? And the idea of bringing people together. And so Claudia Jones is one person, a black woman, who I always recommend that people learn more about, because her vision, her mind of, hey, let's bring our people together. Let's find joyous occasions. Let's celebrate our foods, celebrate our cultures, and let's use this as a tool to build political power now, right? Now that we're together, right? Now that we understand who we are, we understand our culture. Now let's use this to better our material conditions, right? Let's try to create more happiness. Let's try to make sure that our kids are fed. Let's make sure that our people have jobs and those kind of things that support each other. And so I would say, black women particularly, they've taught me a lot of different ways in which to, like you said, Martin, to resist, to create small acts of revolution that's going to create, really, ultimately, like the kind of life we want to live, for the people that haven't been really had those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's really about as you know, my husband is he's Puerto Rican, he's Latin, and so just getting to know and embracing that culture. I'll tell you a funny story. Our first Christmas together, I'm about as white as you come. I'm having this vision in my world. It's like Norman Rockwell, and it's turkey and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of boring, quite frankly. And I remember going out to Long Island to visit with his friends, and they were all Latin, Puerto Rican, and everything. And it was so loud. And they were roasting the pig in the backyard, and they were drinking all day long, and they were just having a blast. And I said, I think there's something to be said about this Latin culture that I'm going to enjoy. And that was 20 years ago. But it's not just about it's more than that. It's that what people miss out on by not getting to know and love and embrace our differences. You know, I mean, just think about our opportunity. If I had to send you on the beach and said, "Oh, I can't go help him because he's a black guy," which is the way I was raised. Quite frankly, I was raised that way in the South. You know, you couldn't play with black boys. You know, I wanted to because I like black boys, but I couldn't play with them because I was.
It's unfortunately it's still a thing now. I lived in Louisiana for a few years, and one of my students, he was 20 years old. At 6 years old, a young white boy told him that. So yeah, I hear that.
You know, so and it did, of course, when I saw you, this beautiful black man having a hard time with his kite, I immediately went over to rescue you and help you because I liked you and I wanted to get to know you, and I'm so glad I did. But it's just, but that's the value, because we're friends now, and we get to know each other, and we get to understand our differences, and we get to embrace that part of each other, and it just broadens our soul, and we're creating a world where everyone has an opportunity to live a life of love and joy and prosperity, and it's not just for a few. And with the work of women, and particularly, I'm just going to go back to Stacey Abrams, is the law we enacted, this economic stimulus law, that is gigantic. That is going to be known in history as the pivotal point in history, when we went out of being in the me, narcissistic cultures, systems that are all about power and economic gain. So, we're going to create policies, we're going to create structures, we're going to create systems where everybody gets to benefit from them. And that huge piece of legislation, and I'll guarantee you this, they're going to get the rest of them through too, because the divine is on their side in this world, in this movement. The spirit, the love, and the divine is on its side. And so all these people now who are still clinging to power and to whatever they can, they're scared because they're realizing the game is over. The game is over. We're not going back to that old way. And it's really exciting, and people like Stacey Abrams are leading the way. And it's just really fun to be alive right now.
I will say, and I will add one thing to note too, is that oftentimes when I find myself, I would say not opposition, but on a different perspective, is the idea of the USA not just as a country but as an empire. And so I think that is one thing, being a Haitian, and coming from a place that's not here, it is important to understand what imperialism means, in terms of, while there might be, like I said, like the stimulus package being passed here. Unfortunately, the USA still has sanctions against countries like Venezuela, countries like Cuba, right? And so for me, and I have to make sure I say it out loud, it is important for me to note that while domestic policy might be going in a good direction, it is important to always think about those beings, right, those spiritual beings who are being affected by our policies, that aren't within our borders. And that's the other thing too, where I have to figure that the
Absolutely.
borders shouldn't really dictate all those kind of things. So it is
I,
important to see those
yeah,
good things, but also note the harm that's still being done by the USA empire.
yeah, and well, I hope that's going to be. I hope we're seeing that, and I have hope that will become less and less. Because I think one thing that it certainly seemed like to me with this administration is that they have been trying their best. It's not going to happen like that. They got to do it. But I think the heart is in the right place to be better neighbors, to be part of a community, and not tolerate things in other countries that are inhumane, like what's going on in Russia and some other countries that they've spoken up against. So I think I agree with you, and that's also a thing of the past. It's not going to happen. Nothing happens overnight, but we begin. It's a big ship, but we are moving it toward in the right direction, and getting it off this old path of being the world dominant power, but being the world's, maybe we could be the most loving and generous, powerful country on the planet that enjoys its generosity and ability to share with others its vast resources, mostly of wonderful people. I mean, that's our biggest resource, is a country full of really wonderful people like you and me, and people watching our show. That's the real resources of us, and I think we're gonna get to shine on that and see the world from a good perspective. So I agree with you. I love your perspective. I know what we do around the world. what we, particularly in the last 4 years, has been atrocious. I mean, what goes on down at the border has been atrocious. I mean, and the more recent, what I'm hearing now is with Kamala Harris being the new in charge of trying to help that problem, solve that problem. It's really about going into the countries and making it where people don't want to leave their countries. You know, they don't. It's safe to be at home, and if we can accomplish that, then we can really make a difference by being a really good neighbor and being supportive of the people in those countries when they're being mistreated. And I don't know much about all the details of that, but I think I like the general concept of it anyway. Put it that way. You don't put sanctions on countries. You go in and you give them, including Cuba. I mean, I think it's time that we. And I think Obama was trying to make some inroads there, of trying to embrace. Keeping sanctions on Cuba is just hurting the Cuban people. I mean, it doesn't really do anything but just hurt people who live there. And so it's time we began to do things that create policies that actually embrace and uphold those people's rights and privileges like anywhere else.
Martin, you just gave me well, I don't know if it's an original thought, but we talk about the idea of scarcity and poverty thinking often, and ultimately I realized that is a lot of the ways in which the USA empire operates. The idea that that there could only be one powerful nation, the idea that somebody needs to be in charge as opposed to a more collaborative,
Right.
a more collaborative approach. And so I think, unfortunately, USA imperialist politics.
All of this need to be better than you and bigger than you and more power. That all comes out of the scarcity mindset. That there's not enough, and there's plenty for everybody. We don't have to be the most powerful. We have to be. We can be the most loving, and the most generous, and the most abundant, and sharing our resources with others to make a difference in their lives. Wouldn't that be a much more fun way to be an American in my book?
Much more fun.
Yeah. Well, it's half after the hour, and it's time for our meditation. But and you and I could talk for 2 hours, I think, and not get tired. But I do want to bring us back to our meditation. So I'm going to take that on right this moment. We're going to do about 20 minutes. So if I can invite you just to sit up in your chair and raise your arms up in the air. Raise your arms up in the air. And the reason I ask you to do that is for two reasons. One, I want to just celebrate gay, bi, trans men this month, and I want to celebrate Nehemiah. But we're doing it also to remind us that is where the spirit is in our body. Without the life spirit, you could not raise your arms. You would just be, I don't care how big your muscles are, how much you went to the gym. If you didn't have that life spark inside you, your essence, you would not raise your arms. You wouldn't even be hearing me, and I wouldn't be talking. It's that one being that Nehemiah, you can put your hands down now. It's that one being that Nehemiah was talking about, that we're all connected. And that's the purpose of this meditation, is to help us to let go of our thoughts and our heads of disconnection and go into the reality of connection. And we do that through a practice called centering prayer, where we center our energy around the heart space, that center point within us where all creation unites other creation. It's like a beacon, if you will, of life within us, where the oxygen comes with the blood. So we use the breath as a way to take us more deeply inside of ourselves. So one little technique to quiet, to slow down the mind is when we're thinking, the back of our tongue vibrates. So one way is to reverse engineer it. Slow down the vibration of the tongue, and you'll slow down the thinking in your head. And the way I like to do that is to take the tip of my tongue and gently rest it on the roof of your mouth, just behind your two front teeth. Part your lips slightly and relax your jaw and just breathe. And as you're breathing in through the mouth and through the nose, gently massage the back of your tongue. So just try that for a moment. Just tongue on the roof of your mouth, behind the teeth, part your lips, relax the jaw, and just breathe and begin to get mindful of the breath, gently relaxing and massaging the back of your tongue. Allow the back of your tongue to just relax as it feels the breath, gently massaging it to slow down. And use the belly to pull the breath deep inside of yourself. Allow the mind to begin to focus on your breathing. the in-breath, the out-breath. We get very still inside our bodies. And just notice what's going on. Notice how you might be feeling some emotions. Maybe you're feeling some fear. Maybe you're feeling some joy. Maybe you're feeling some shame, anger. Don't fight it. Just feel it and welcome it. And allow the feelings to pull you even more deeply inside of yourself. And now we're going to do 3, what I call belly breaths. Get a little more space inside ourselves. It's going to look like this. You're going to use your belly muscles to pull the breath in through the nose, down the throat. Relax and massage the back of your tongue. Expand the rib cage and the heart. Pull the breath into your belly, expand the belly, and hold it for just a second. And then we're going to let it go. So you ready? Pull the breath in. Hold it. And just now gently let it go. And as you let go of everything in your mind. Let go of every thought, every judgment, every belief about what's good and bad, right and wrong, every story. Just let them all go. Empty yourself for love. Just breathe. Become more familiar with your internal landscape. Notice how the thinking can take you back up into your head and out of the moment. Just thank that brilliant mind for thinking again. One more belly breath. Pull the breath in. Hold it into your belly. Just let it go. And then let go of every other belief and opinion and judgment you have about me, yourself, Nehemiah, the world, COVID. Hold on to nothing. And just allow yourself to fall back and dance in the emptiness of pure, infinite love energy. And be still and know that I am the divine. I am God, not me, Martin, but I am. I am he who is talking, and you are who is listening, is the divine. We're just opening up the channel to get more intimate with that part of ourselves that just loves unconditional, without judgment. One more belly breath, and that's going to be it. And use the bell to bring us more deeply inside ourselves. So again, with the belly, pull the breath in through the nose, down the throat, massage the tongue, open the heart. Really expand the belly. Get a lot of space. Anchor yourself into your body with the spirit. Now just gently let it go. Fall and soften more deeply into the divine. And there's that sweet sound of the wake up bell. It's called an interval bell to wake us up from our thinking, our planning, our stories, our worrying. And the invitation is to simply smile and thank that brilliant brain. It's just doing its job, and let it go and gently fall back into the infinite love within yourself, back into your essence, back into your being. There's one more wake up bell just to wake us up from our thinking, our planning, our sleeping, and bring us back into this moment. Celebrate this moment in our life. This moment, the most important moment that there is, because this is the only moment. And bring us into this moment, into our being. And there's our final bell to bring us back to the moment, bring us back into this space and time. Thank you, everybody. How's everyone feeling? How you feeling, Nehemiah?
Feeling wonderful. Thank you, Martin.
I'm feeling wonderful having you here. It was wonderful sharing the space with you today. And anybody have any questions in the audience that want to ask us and about what we talked about today? And before we sign out, and also, Nehemiah, what if people want to know more about you? Want to know about what you're doing? What is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on one of the projects I'm working on right now. I shared with you, Martin. So as I know, I love history, right, Sankofa, and so I also love music too. And so I do a funk music history podcast, a '70s funk music history podcast. So I use the framework of the 1970s political and socioeconomic scene to also describe how the culture, right, the music, the art was in sync with those as well. And so I have two episodes. I did my DC episode and I did Miami episode, and now I'm finishing up an episode on New Orleans. And so we go through indigenous history, really like I said, the origins of things, right? We go through the indigenous history. We know who was there first, what was their culture like, how did that land become that land now that we have the scene. how did the music manifest, or how did the culture, all those things that happened before there, how did the culture then create, from that stew of, whatever's going on. And so that's Thank with DJ Tequesta. I'm on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts as well. So Stank with DJ Tequesta, Tequesta. My Instagram is Metamiah, Metamiah. My supervisor says that I'm very meta, and so I was like, okay, I'll take it. And of course, I'm on Facebook as well, Nehemiah Legiste, as y'all see on the scroll here. And I'm always, and as Martin knows, I love these kind of conversations. I really do like, open my mind and perspectives and really learning from everybody, because whether that's one of the reasons I love kids actually. I love kids because more than anything else, kids really remind you among the main things what's important in life, right? The need for the basic security, but also to joy, right? Laughing, interacting with another, really being, actually honest about how we feel about things. If a kid is hurt, the kid's gonna let you know they're hurt. If they're having a good time, they're gonna be smiling and happy. And so really being in touch, not just with the inner child, but also the outer child as well, and really finding the joy and the joy as best you can in this life.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I got to check out your podcast. I think I checked out one of it. It was good. And it's just really been a pleasure having you on. And I want to just let everyone know that one, I will not be here tomorrow. I'm part of a program, and we have a pretty exciting event there going on Wednesdays. So I'm not going to be broadcasting on Wednesdays here anymore, but I do want to make you aware that as some of you know, I am a prosperity coach. I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm a mindset coach. I work largely with gay, bi, and trans men. And I've recently created a Facebook group called Financial Heart Space for Gay, Bi, Trans Men. And I'd love for you to join that group. There's a link somewhere around this video. Please join us. We'd love to have you. I've also got another Facebook group for everybody. It's called the Financial Mystic Sanctuary. So if you want to tune in and find out more about the spiritual teachings and how basically almost all the same things that we do inside the other Facebook group, except for this is we deal with more with issues that are internal to men, that internal conflicts that men have. And that's why it's not about not excluding anybody, but in that particular group, we create a safe space for men to deal with their own internal conflicts that we understand because we're men. Like women have their own, we have theirs, and they have theirs. So it's just, I just want to be explaining why that's there. So if you are a gay, bi, or trans man and you want to be able to apply some of these principles to resolving some of your own internal conflicts, please join us in that Facebook group. I know Nehemiah is a member, and we'd love to have more people join us over there. So I'm actually doing a live webinar, a live workshop tomorrow at 1 o'clock in that group on the different stairways of selves and how we get caught down in the lower echelons below what I call the false truth line in the drama triangle. And so when we understand the 12 ladders, the 12 stairways of selves, from the lower realms of the human body to the higher realms of the human mind, and even the highest realms of all, which are our spiritual realms. And the whole idea there is when we transcend and include the lower realms, we can become a wholehearted human being. And we get to align our mind, our body, and our spirit. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to be teaching tomorrow about the science behind that so that you understand what exactly is happening. Because today we don't just, it's not just about what we see, because of such wonderful scientific breakthrough, we can actually understand energy more thoroughly. And it's all energy. It's all it is about energy. We're all energy vibrating at various vibrations. Lighter things, love vibrates at a higher frequency than dense things like rocks. So it's really all about where we are on that whole thing. And human beings, we have all three. We have all three. We are created with all three. And the idea is to align them so that we're not in conflict. Okay? So that's a place you can go and join us if you like. So we'd love to have you join us over there. Or if you want to join us more of that, just also there's the Financial Mystic Sanctuary, and everybody's welcome to come join us over there. And we talk about all kind of fun stuff in there too. So having said all that, thank you so much for joining us. Nehemiah, stick around for just a second so we can just hang out for a second after we close this out. And may love and prosperity prevail.